Thank you so much for joining us today for our panel discussion about fighting fake websites yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I am Sam Bakken. I'm Director of Product Marketing for Allure Security, where we protect brands and help organizations reduce cybersecurity, fraud, and reputation risk by identifying fake websites, fake social media profiles, and fake mobile apps that impersonate brands to defraud consumers. Really quick, I want to inform you of a few things before we jump in here. So first, the session is being recorded. We will distribute a link to that recording in the coming days to the email address that you used to register with us. And then second, I want to draw your attention to the Q&A function that you should find towards the bottom of your Zoom interface. And, you can ask a question there at any time. And, we have a great slate of questions prepared for our panelists, but it would be really great to tack on, any pressing questions that you might have as well during the conversation. So don't hesitate. If something comes to mind, please do enter that into the Q&A function in the interface as you can see it there. So now with those items kind of out of the way, why are we here today? Well, online fraud, as you likely know, is a booming business. It costs an estimated $76 billion annually, and a lot of that is fueled by fake websites, deceptive social media profiles, and rogue mobile apps that impersonate brands to exploit the trusted relationships businesses have with their prospects and customers. And the thing is, the problem is getting bigger. Attackers are really increasing their efforts here. For example, the Anti-Phishing Working Group actually reported an all-time record high in unique scam websites impersonating a brand in December 2021. That's the latest available data there. And I want to, emphasize that that's triple of what it was in early 2020. Online brand impersonation attacks are serious stuff. They result in revenue loss of online traffic, a loss of consumer trust in digital channels, and then they also damage a brand's reputation and affect customer loyalty as well. So the problem of online brand impersonation is not new. It's been around for a decade or more. So, why do scammers seem to be winning this fight? So to help us investigate this kind of state of affairs, we've got three cybersecurity luminaries. You see them on your screen now, and I'll introduce them in alphabetical order. So first we have Dr. Ed Amoroso, who is currently Chief Executive Officer of Tag Cyber, a global research and advisory company that supports enterprise cybersecurity teams and commercial security vendors around the world. Ed recently retired from AT&T after 31 years of service, culminating as Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer from 2004 to 2016. Ed has served as research professor at Tandon School of Engineering at NYU since 2017 and has been adjunct professor of computer science at the Stevens Institute of Technology for the past 30 years. Ed also serves as an advisor to the Applied Physics Laboratory at Johns Hopkins University and is author of count them, 6 books on cybersecurity and dozens of papers and articles in peer-reviewed and major publication. Hi, Ed. So glad you're here. Thank you very much. Next, I'm thrilled to introduce David McLeod, Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for Cox Enterprises, a leading communications, media, and automotive services company. David leads the information risk and cybersecurity services for Cox Enterprises. His team drives the strategy and governance of security capabilities necessary to safeguard Cox business interests from cyber threats. In this role, he oversees IT risk and compliance, threat management, information protections, and cyber incident response. He joined Cox Enterprises in 2016. Prior to Cox, David held global leadership and consulting roles at VF Corporation, Walmart, Equifax, and KPMG. He is an innovative thinker as a CISO and advisor to several startup ventures. Thanks so much for being here, David. And then finally, we're lucky to have Josh Shaul, Chief Executive Officer at Allure Security. As CEO, Josh shapes and executes Allure Security's vision. He brings more than 20 years of information security experience, including leadership roles at Akamai, Singtel/Trustwave, and SafeNet. Josh is a visionary security leader. I can attest to this. He's my boss. He's passionate about providing comprehensive digital protection to businesses while inspiring trust and confidence in their customers and clients. Prior to Allure Security, Josh was VP of Web Security at Akamai Technologies, where he shepherded the business unit's explosive growth to nearly $1 billion in annual revenue. Josh is also the author of an acclaimed book on database security and is a sought-after speaker at major industry conferences, delivering talks across the globe, including a keynote address at the 2018 RSA conference. Thanks for being here, Josh. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to see you. So, without further ado, let's jump right into this. Would love to start with firsthand experiences. So here's the question. How has the fight against online fraud and particularly deceptive online content changed from yesterday to today as you've seen it over the years? We're actually going to get started with David, then go to Ed, and then go to Josh.
Love the question to get us started, right? Because everything is changing exponentially in a bad way. So 5 years ago at the Cox companies, we thought about elections. Once every 4 years, there would be some noise. Once every 4 years, make sure there's not a little bit of website defacement. Make sure there's not a hijack of your message. But today we got political sensitivity based on geography, right? When somebody played the explicit Trump rap song in South Carolina, it had one response. When they played that same explicit rap song in California, it had a different response. So we're just confused now about it's coming faster. What will it mean when it happens? So when it comes down to websites, it's active on all the time. The fraud is there all the time, but yet the impact is never known until after it goes wrong. So that's biggest difference.
Obviously, David's right. My observation is that the motivation and consequence have shifted pretty significantly. Like when I first started looking at these things, like the concept of defacing a website was the ultimate act of graffiti when you're a young hacker, right? It's what we all did. And it almost was viewed, and I don't want to give the wrong impression here, it was almost viewed in those days as innocent mischief with no real consequence. Sometimes maybe even, dare I say, doing you a favor. If some hacker found some problem on your site, goofed around a little bit, you'd fix it. It was that kind of very collegial feel. Not too long ago. Now, I guess as I get older, time goes more quickly, but it doesn't seem like that long ago. Now, when you see that just the concept of online fraud and definitely any type of deceptive content, you know darn well that it's not something just innocent. The vast majority has some probably pretty malicious intent associated with it and has to be taken more seriously. So I see the whole mood of dealing with this problem shifting from one that had a less consequential feel, maybe even a little bit of an academic feel to it. We were all learning how to do this, and the young people doing it, you'd slap their hand, but you'd ask how they did it. It was from that to something very different. Now this is a legitimate business problem. And if you're not working with a vendor, if you're listening to me now and you don't have a good vendor partner helping you here, you probably should go do something quickly, because this is no longer child's play. This is a serious problem.
I'd like to give a couple of examples to add to what Ed's saying. For me, yeah, the fraud has always been there, but now I'm starting to get numbers on it for the first time, right? So for the first time, I got companies like Allure and others telling me, here's how much traffic went away during this time when the fraudulent site was available. Here's how much stolen ad revenue may have gone with it. Here's the stolen credentials. We can't quantify that. Here's some fraudulent transactions that could have taken place in that window of 1 day, 1 week. So that stuff has my name attached to it. And I don't know what it means. And there's plenty of good research out there that shows revenue growth is driven by no negative sentiments. So it's more than the other marketing plans. It's just by not having a tarnish on the brand is an accelerator. So how do we keep a brand clean when I'm not even controlling where the brand's being used?
Thank you for those specifics, David. That's great stuff. So Josh, where are you on this? How has the fight evolved? do you agree with Ed that it was kind of child's play mischief, and then now it's moving into a real, quantifiable impact on brands, as David has suggested?
Yeah, look, folks have been making money with fraud on the internet for some time. It's kind of the oldest business on the internet. But what they've been doing, like any good business, is making money the easiest way they can, with the lowest costs of operation, with the lowest barrier to entry. And because of the good work that security teams have done, and because of the innovation of security vendors, a lot of those easier paths to fraud are no longer easy or even viable. And that's forced the organizations, the criminal organizations that have built up an infrastructure to turn data into cash, data that they steal from the web, that is, to look for different tactics that may be more difficult to execute, may take longer to execute, but allow them to put the data into their systems that allow them, again, to produce money at the other side. So for years, we saw a massive explosion of credential stuffing attacks targeting major websites, where these bot armies came with millions of usernames and passwords, guessing along the way, trying to figure out which accounts had good credentials so that they could take over those accounts and pump out the dollars. It's very hard to do that these days. You've got a number of security organizations that have popped up to address that problem. That technology's become relatively mature, it's widely deployed, but the desire to take over those accounts and pump dollars out of them still exists. And thus the transition to things like online impersonations, where whether they be websites or mobile apps or social media pages, where a fraudster takes the time to impersonate the brand that they're targeting. They take the time to build the fake profile, the fake website, and to trick victims into giving up their data so that all the data they collect is good, all of it is actionable, and all of it they can action immediately. The statistics show us that this data, once collected, is used and done within 24 hours. So you've got this very, very, very rapid use of the data once it's collected from the victims. And so that the whole timeline here has been compressed from the beginning of an attack till the end of an attack once the data has been pulled out. The tactics have shifted from targeting basically databases full of data to targeting individuals that can be fooled into giving up a single piece of data. But when you start to multiply this and push it out through all the different channels that are available, email, SMS, mobile apps, social media, advertising online, you end up with the ability to cast such a wide net. You can catch so many victims that the problem only grows and grows as the scammers figure out how to take advantage of these new ways and to make them as efficient, if not more efficient, than the ways that they used in the past to get their hands on this data that led to cash.
Well, I agree there, Josh. I think it's much more efficient, right? If you can make the Christmas bonus with 100 pieces of accurate data, that's better than the problem of trying to steal 2 million out of record. But one thing that has not changed in the last 5 years, I don't know of a measurable consequence to those in the business. Right? This is not where we see arrests. This is not where we see takedowns. So that part, this has not seemed to change for me.
Very good, very good. Thank you. So, Josh, you were kind of talking about how some things worked way back. Attackers then had to, evolve a bit, take different tactics to trick people into giving up their credentials, as you said. With that in mind, I'm going to start again with you, Josh. Whose fault is it that scammers and phishers, seem to be winning this battle a little bit? Is this governments failing to sort of regulate this? Is it law enforcement? Is it brands and businesses? Is it vendors, registrars, hosts, consumers? What's your viewpoint on that? Spicy takes are encouraged.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of opportunities to throw blame in a lot of different directions. The one place where I don't think it should be thrown is on the victims of these scams. I mean, we all have a weak moment now and again. We all are bombarded with legitimate emails and text messages and things that we're expected to reply to and reply to rapidly. And it's invariable that something's going to slip through once in a while for some meaningful percentage of the population. That being said, the blame game doesn't really get us anywhere. Telling organizations, saying, hey, banks, when you lose credentials, we should fine you, doesn't help to solve the problem either. I think that there's really a different approach that's needed where, hey, we need we need to take advantage of the new technology that's available to help address the problem. And the approaches that are available today in 2022 weren't available 2-3 years ago. Even there's an enormous innovation that's happened that industry needs to take advantage of and effectively upgrade the systems that they've already got in place, the money that they're already spending to try to address the problem with solutions that just don't address today's problem. So I think that's part of it. I think there's also a very big opportunity here for collaboration, and collaboration potentially that's facilitated by government and law enforcement, but collaboration that allows organizations to share the data that they're collecting, to share the information about scams and scammers and tactics and techniques to create a more effective approach to both defending organizations, to identifying and stopping these things. And then more importantly, I think, to addressing what David brought up earlier about the consequences. You know, if we're able to really start to create an environment where we don't only make it difficult for folks to set up a fake website or a fake social media account impersonating a brand to collect data, but we make it possible to catch them and prosecute them, that really changes the dynamics of the problem space. And when it comes to fraud, there is a desire to prosecute the fraudsters that are stealing millions or billions of dollars out there. Not in every jurisdiction in the world, but in a significant majority of them, there is. And there's also enough money on the table for organizations that they're willing to do what it takes to help lure fraudsters out of the jurisdictions where they don't want to enforce the law and into places where they can. And there's a lot of stories about how that's successfully happened in the past. So there's where I see things starting to evolve. I see that taking advantage of the evolution in technology for individual organizations to be more responsible for their own brands, to be more proactive to solve the problem for themselves is a clear step that I think every organization is taking or will take as they come to realize there's opportunities to improve their defenses. But I think the real win comes when organizations have a means for collaboration and sharing the information about the scams and the scammers, so that a scam may hit one victim in one organization, but almost the entire world is then quickly inoculated against that scam and scammer. That really changes the dynamics and could potentially put an end to a lot of this kind of activity as it becomes a bad business for the scammers to run.
David, it looks like you're chomping at the bit there. What do you say? Is the blame game not worth it? Is there a need for collaboration? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree, and then I'm going to take the capitalist point of view. I definitely agree with Josh, not on the consumer. You can't train people to recognize fake digital properties, especially in a mobile world, right? We're not wired for it, let alone our weak moments. Totally agree there. Totally agree on the collaboration. NCFTA, National Cyber Forensics Training Alliance, they specialize in building a case. Why do you have to build a case? Because law enforcement is super busy. So their membership and their collaborators do a great job of saying, hey, I just saw that, pull some forensic data. Now I got, 83 pieces of proof to this group of guys doing these things with, anything from key fobs to websites. So they do a great job of that. Yes, we need a lot more, but I'm going to take the blame here. Businesses and supply chains are responsible. I'm the one that's taking a risk to earn a profit. I have the ability to exert influence, pressure, or incentives because I'm the one that orchestrates the value chain for how everybody makes money. For example, Walmart can make the world tilt, right? You do this thing or you don't do business with us. So I think that us in the profit motive world have a tremendous incentive to do more. Law enforcement is not funded by me. Things like NCFTA are. And honestly, I just wish someone would create a known secure supply chain for me, because once we get into third parties and fourth parties, it's impossible. But I think I have to take onus because I'm the one saying, come do business. What do you think, Ed?
It's hard to go third here because, Josh is so eloquent in his points. I'm sort of nodding at everything he says, but I got to tell you that David and I come from a similar place. I really do resonate. Like, it's about action, right? Maybe just get rid of the word blame and who takes action? Who's supposed to do something? And, it is, look, if you're in business doing this, then you got to take the bull by the horns. There's some places where you could argue like, I'll give you an example. Let's say David's sitting in his office and like some enemy planes come over dropping bombs on the building. I'm kind of thinking David's calling the military saying, hey, I need help. This is not my wheelhouse. I'm not going to put somebody on the roof with a helmet and field glasses, looking for incoming or something. That's not right. But in this area, it kind of is the business's responsibility to take action. Nope. Blame, get rid of that word. That's just a dumb word to use in cybersecurity. It's overused, but often overused in government, frankly. You see that a little bit too much there. Law enforcement has come to realize, because they've seen so many victims, they're the one group that I think gets us better than anybody. They rarely say blame. They always say victim. So I think that it's action. And if you're listening right now, then you have a responsibility for this sort of thing, the government or some group, even your ISP, is not going to be able to sit in the middle and fix this, nor would you even ask them to. They may be a partner, but it's not going to be, this thing where this something swoops in. It's this massive ecosystem of vendors and technology, even academia. Look at Allure. A lot of the technology you guys built, Sal built while he was at Columbia, right? So academics can make an impact here as well by doing research and innovating. All that stuff is good, but it comes right down to the fact that when there's fraud being committed, money's being stolen, and David's right, man, you're in business. You got to look in the mirror. And you got to take action. You got to do something, and you can use all these partners to help you.
I got to tell you, I'm getting real close to needing to do more, because these environmental sustainability governance reports, they're starting to talk about my responsibility within a community. Here's what I'm doing for the greater goodwill and the trust and the privacy. And so I can't act like I didn't know this is going on, and now I'm having to talk about it. So I'm about to be auditable on what are you doing?
Like root canal, right? Right, David? That feels about the same.
Exactly.
Great. So moving on, not every business is failing at protecting their brand or protecting their customers against impersonations. So, what advice do you have for teams that are dealing with, they're coming to realize that this is a problem, or they're starting to realize and doing some work? It's looking really like whack-a-mole to them. What advice do you have there? Are there sort of aha moments that teams or leaders might notice when they're starting to kind of get this right or approaching it in the right way? I think we'll start with David, if that's all right.
I'm going to pitch it to Ed, if that's all right.
Well, I'm happy to take it. So here's been my experience with this sort of thing, as both an executive dealing with teams that had to do this, and now as a coach and as a research advisor. When you ask a team that has this responsibility to explain the problem and to explain it in detail, meaning take me through the infrastructure, take me through the way it works, show me the front ends, the back ends, the business logic, the partner systems, and so on. In more cases than not, they can't do it. And I think that's the first step. I know it's not really the high-tech kind of recommendation here, but the idea that you probably don't really understand how your systems are working, your commerce and whatever online resources are being targeted. That's step one. It's the analog to, do you have an inventory for your enterprise before you go deploying all these cybersecurity tools? That version of it is, in this case, is go to whiteboard, whatever, explain to me how this works. And if you can't do it, then that's the first step. And it's a lot harder than you think. I've seen people go on this journey for months trying to figure out really in their mind how things work, because it's typically a lot more complicated than you think. As you chip away, you find more backends, you find more systems you didn't know about, you find more electronic connections to things that do anything from maintenance to update to financial transaction. And when you start to learn how that all works, then you really get a sense, because we always start with, well, if I know how to stop buffer overflow and SQL injection, then I guess I'm done, right? And I'm sure everyone, David, everybody, that's the first inning of the game. That's the easy stuff. The harder things are going to involve your infrastructure, and could be insiders, for example. if you got an insider attack, and it isn't going to be SQL injection, it's going to be a totally different problem. We had that in telecom frequently. As you scatter the support for these things, maybe around the globe, you've got all kinds of groups you may not really have much control over who are touching some aspect of that ecosystem, the supply chain, the customer journey, step by step through to completing the transaction. So I think, again, if you're listening now and you can't fake it, you don't fake yourself out. If you really don't understand it, then that's step one. And just the act of doing that, of getting to where you have detailed, deep insight into every aspect of the ecosystem and how you're set up, a lot of times the solutions fall right in your lap. You go, oh, I see the weakness here, versus throwing a bunch of technology at something you don't understand. So David and Josh, curious what you guys think. That's my low-tech answer to a high-tech question.
Love the answer. Further down the process, I don't know if it's step 2 or 3, I got this other reality. I got to tell you up front, my bias is that I didn't know anyone was really successful at this either. So I know they might not all be failing, but I don't know who's really great at it, because I don't feel like I can get it right until after I know what's out there. And guess what? I never know what's out there. So ideal for me, how would I know I'm getting it right? I can quantify what's happening for what's in my scope, and I would know what's not happening outside my scope, right? So when I first became aware of this proposition, it's like, wait a minute, there's a whole world of assets that are never in my CMDB. There's a whole world of people popping up lookalikes. Never considered it, never had a counter on it. So my third parties and my fourth party, post SolarWinds, that's where do I want visibility? Where do I want to do that basic step 1? It's in all those things, and I don't have anything there. I don't have a compliance view that looks at that. I have not, I contributed to a third-party risk assessment questionnaire years ago. I still don't think we have one that says, show me the controls around, knowing that other sites like yours are not popping up. So it's, this is new question inventory category, because guess what, as CISO, the infrastructure that's not in my control, not under my contract, kind of not my problem, but it is my customer's problem. Josh?
Yeah, look, I love the way that you talk about it. And I really think that the way organizations that are being highly effective can be sort of spotted is through the maturity of the model that they're using. And I think there's a number of levels of maturity that I spot out there. Well, it's not unusual to see organizations that are still unaware of the problem, or unaware that the problem may impact them. And sometimes, typically those are small organizations. It may be a small retailer, it may be a small community bank or credit union, but other times they're larger organizations that just don't have a B2C type of business, but still may have a significant problem with impersonation. For example, targeting potential new hires or contractors or employees. So there's that sort of first phase of like awareness that there is an impersonation problem, which leads to hopefully trying to do something, as you said, to look for the problem, to try to identify where it is out there, and to have some steps that are taken to proactively find and then mitigate these impersonations that are found. So I think that's sort of the next step of maturity is, hey, we're trying to identify and do something about it. As organizations get better at this, and the way you can tell that organizations are really fantastic at this is that they develop metrics around not just the sort of typical security tactical metrics like mean time to identify, mean time to respond, those kind of things, but they identify the business metrics that these impact. They identify the customer service costs, they identify the fraud costs, they identify the lost revenue, the lost ad flow. They're able to actually see the impact that they're having on the business by taking the proactive steps that they are to identify and mitigate. And then I think that as organizations sort of move to the panacea, they become more predictive in their ability to take the data that's in front of them, to take the information about the scams that are being identified, and to make effective predictions about where the next scams are going to show up, where the stuff that you don't know about is likely going to be, so that you can start to go and prepare for it. Very, very few organizations get into that, I think, that level of maturity around the problem. But the good news is that most organizations don't need to. For most organizations, just to get to the point where they have metrics around this is why we're doing it and this is how it's impacting our business and the results that we're having is more than enough. I think it's just for the larger organizations that really are going to have an ongoing problem that has significant top or bottom line impact, that it makes sense to develop those detailed metrics and get to the predictive model, because this can be the difference between a business that's wildly profitable and a business that's kind of not.
Great. Really glad to see that kind of connection, both talking about this quantification of those metrics and that being a real game changer to understand the problem and show how you're making some progress against it. I want to take a quick break really quick to remind everybody again that we have the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom interface. So if you have a pressing question, please get that in there so that we can answer that. We have some that have come in. They're a little bit specific to Allure Security, so we'll probably hit those at the end. Thank you for those questions, but I just want to remind everybody that we are ready and willing to take audience questions at any time, so keep them coming. Thank you. Now, we're talking about this inventory, known knowns, known unknowns, and that sort of thing. Obviously, the internet is humongous. So my God, how does one start to get that inventory? The question here is, what effect is artificial intelligence and machine learning having on brand protection and, identifying and, responding to fake online content? So David, it looks like you're unmuted, so maybe we'll start with you.
Okay, well, this is a super easy one, right, on AI and ML. And my super easy answer is I have no idea, and that's why I buy Allure. Because as a CISO, I've got 99 problems, and AI and ML aren't one of them. So thanks for I'm very grateful for much smarter people figuring out how to look at the whole world and create a single graph from it. That's all I got.
I can chime in with something. So first off, David's right that sometimes the really, really super high tech thing may or may not be the right thing. Again, what you guys are doing at Allure is pretty high tech concept. It's different than ML. The way machine learning would work in this context is using something called a linear regression, and it'd be a binary output, it'd be yes or no or some probabilistic thing. Is there fraud? Yes or no? You just take all the factors and you build models, blah, blah, blah. So there are companies that are trying to do that. And we'll see, right? The disadvantage of automation is that the offense has just as much access to it as the defense. So I think you're likely to see in the coming, I don't know, probably years, that the automated tools for doing this will take the next step and be a little bit more intelligent and autonomous. Now the automation works the way all automation works, repetitive tasks and trolling through lots of possibilities. But being able to be more humanoid in the thinking is frightening, right? That's something that you don't think. So we always think machine learning for defense, but you can't forget machine learning on the offense too. So David and others are going to be dealing with that headache, pretty soon, often from nation states. So I think that in general, this idea of machine learning, let me say something in general about it that I hope is useful for people. The negative visceral response we always have when a marketing person whips the AI stuff at us is usually warranted, because a lot of times there's not much depth behind what's put on the brochure, but sometimes there is. And that's the problem. Like, you kind of do have to search for the wheat from the chaff. You do have to, because occasionally a good solid machine learning algorithm is awesome. Really is just the right tool for that problem. So that's probably something, another bit of general advice I'd offer to people. Be careful throwing it all out. There are a lot of silly claims that are made in our industry, but not all of them. Sometimes it's useful.
Maybe I'll jump in with some data and some of our experience doing what we do at Allure Security to identify these fake websites and other brand impersonations. And I'll go all the way back to sort of the roots for us. When organizations started to look for these problems, they started to look for them because their customers called and complained. So there were complaints about, hey, I got scammed, there was fraud. And organizations know how to respond and react when a customer calls and complains and say, I went to this and such website, mobile app, social media account, turned out to scam me or defraud me, organizations know how to respond to that, but they wanted to get proactive. And so what they started to do was look for new websites that popped up that had a name similar to theirs. And this is a technique and technology that's been around for a while now. It's called domain monitoring, typo squat detection, and it's an important thing that organizations do, is effectively to take a look at any new website that pops up. It's got a name that could be mistaken for yours. The thing is, take a look at it. When I say take a look at it, I truly mean take a look at it. I mean, have a human analyst sit down and click on the website and see what's there. There's really no other way to sort of automatically go out and assess a website, at least to know whether that website is of concern or not for various reasons, other than take a look and see what's on that site. The problem is, though, there's too many sites. Even if you're doing just that simple process of looking for sites that have a name that's similar to yours, you may have to look through 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 sites to get through the whole list of sites that have a name similar to yours. And once you got through the whole list, you kind of got to start over again, because things change on the internet pretty rapidly. And that becomes just impossible. There's just not enough time and patience in the universe to do that and to do it manually. So at Allure Security, one of the key things we set out to do is to try to automate that process, was to try to take that list of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 and look through the sites the same way a person would, by actually rendering the pages, looking at the images on the screen, reading the words on the screen, even looking through some of the code and the hosting behind some of these pages and sites. And then you can make a decision. Hey, does this look like a brand I recognize? Does this read like a brand that I recognize? Is it hosted like a brand that I recognize? These are the kind of things that a human analyst does, that we decided to automate. And once we were able to do this for 1,000 sites a day, 10,000 sites a day, 100,000 sites a day, we realized we no longer had to be constrained by this domain monitoring concept of only looking at websites that have a similar name. And that turns out to be really important, because if you look at the actual data, and Allure Security is in the process of our own research right now, where throughout Q1 of 2022, we monitored over 1,000 different banks and credit unions looking for impersonations of them. And we found quite a few, and only about a third, 31%, if I remember correctly, could possibly be detected with some kind of domain monitoring, meaning only about a third had a name that was anywhere similar to the victim organization. So even with all that effort that you'd have to go through, there's just these limits. And now that we've managed to figure out how to use image processing, computer vision technology, natural language processing technology to look at and read these sites, we can do it at a scale at which it allows us to look through massive chunks of internet, tens of millions of pages a day, looking for things like logos and phrases and images and colors and fonts and other identifiers that we can recognize and tie back to a brand. One of the interesting things we learned as we did that is that the scammers don't have any rules. The scammers don't have to live by the marketing department's branding guidelines. In fact, their goal is to not live by the marketing department's brand guidelines. And in fact, one of the things that Ed mentioned about the bad guys using AI and ML, we're actively seeing exploited in the space, where we see images, brand logo images and other branding images, manipulated in predictable ways in order to try to make it so that if you've got a simple logo detector, for example, that looks at a page and sees if your logo file is there, you won't notice it, because that logo file has changed formats. All the bits are different. It's now a little blurrier. It's got some little white lines that you can't see with your eye, but you can see when you look at the bits behind the file. We actively see that happening, and therefore we learn from that as well, constantly picking up the modifications that the scammers are making out there and growing our understanding of brands and what they look like to include what the scams look like. And it's very, very interesting over time how much these things separate from each other. The legitimate brand going in its branding direction and the scammers going in a different direction, counting on the fact that most consumers don't have that level of intimacy with every brand that they interact with and can be fooled by a branding that looks a little different, or that used last year's branding, or that combines last year's branding with this year's branding in a way that was never done by the brand, but there it is online.
That's great. Thanks, Josh, for giving us kind of a peek into the scope of the problem and why, the scale of the problem requires some automation here. So the next question, this is one that I wanted to make sure that we got to. So I'm going to ask it, and then we actually have one more on the slate, but we might just jump into some attendee questions. But here it is, and I'll maybe let you all choose who wants to jump in first, depending on who's excited to answer it first. So the idea of hacking back, right, or launching counterattacks against a bad actor or fraudster is a controversial topic. So here it is to the panel. Should businesses consider going on the offensive against online brand impersonations? Why or why not? What might that look like? Does anyone want to get us started on that?
I'd be happy to sort of start the discussion there. I have a feeling all of us would agree that just sort of unfettered hack back from an organization based on something that they observe and are outraged at, and they're going to go take action, never a good idea. Like, that's not acceptable. So if anybody's sitting there feeling some sort of vigilante pull here, I think otherwise. And I suspect law enforcement would be nodding as well. So this is not a place to do Wild West. Now, that said, hackback as a legitimate mechanism is a different story, right? So under the right set of circumstances, look, you guys are the experts at this. You guys know how this whole thing works. As a mechanism, it can be extremely effective. It must be properly designed and constrained and controlled. Like, you don't, look, collateral damage is the first thing you worry about. Let's say some hosting complex is coming at you, and you see the domain and you say, I'm going to take them out, and you take them out not knowing that a bunch of children's hospitals use the same hosting complex. There, you took a bunch of children's hospitals out. How do you feel? So it's like that. Under the right set of circumstances where you know what you're doing, you understand what the meaning is to collateral damage, and you've got experience and you've got able to keep it within the guardrails, then I'm kind of for it. But again, control, like law enforcement or a technology platform that includes it as a mechanism. So let me summarize. As a strategy for anybody, no freaking way. As a mechanism, really interesting. Let's talk. Let's see how it can be used, because it's very new. You guys are on the cutting edge here with this sort of thing. It's not something like David or myself could say, oh, we got 20 years experience to do this sort of thing. We don't. But I think it's a good mechanism, and it definitely deserves some attention and treatment. That's why we're all here, because we're very, very supportive of the concept. But again, the vigilante going off and hacking, that's not going to end well.
I love that, Ed. To extend upon that, you're right. It's as a mechanism, that mechanism requires an expert, right? You don't pick a fight on the street without knowing who you're dealing with, right? Because you take a swing and you find out they have a knife or they have a gun. But so in these, beyond the collateral damage, you swing back because it's one thing. Well, turns out you just bumped into pressure tactic number 2 that was part of a bigger ransomware there. So you just accelerated your own demise because you're not the expert that they are. So intelligence, counterintelligence, what are you really dealing with? Is this just an annoyance or the tip of something else? Because I have to admit, since Russia-Ukraine came about, I get these very tiny targeted things from formidable forces that I didn't build for, because I built for the script kiddies and the organized crime. So yeah, you got to stay out of fights unless you really know everything about who you're going against and what they're up to.
Yeah, let me provide maybe a little context as to why we even bring this up in this conversation. And it's because Allure Security really truly believes in making the attacker's job much more difficult for them and making it very difficult for them to turn a profit on this fraud. And we get very proactive about making that happen. But I don't think it's hacking back. I think of it almost like a countersuit. When somebody sues you and you turn around and hire an even better lawyer and turn around and sue them back. And the reason why I think of it that way and what we do is really we've got scammers out there that are inviting the public to put data into their campaigns, usernames and passwords, credit cards, personal information, all different information. But these scammers are basically inviting folks to come to their sites, to their pages, to their apps, and to input data. At Allure Security, we come to their sites, to their pages, to their apps, and we input data, the data that they're looking for, but not the data that they want. And we do that in order to fill their bucket of data with poison data they can't use, poison data that breaks the business model for them, poison data that could potentially lead them to revealing their identities and being caught. But we do those things without, for example, breaking into a system ourselves, gaining unauthorized access to a server, executing a denial of service attack. And we do all those things exactly because of what Ed mentioned. We're not looking for law enforcement to come knocking on our door one day and saying, hey, you ran afoul of the law, nor are we looking to knock out the hosting for good businesses just because there's also bad organizations that are being hosted on the same infrastructure or even on the same domains in some cases. So there is quite a bit of subtlety and care that needs to be exercised when you go on the offensive in the cybersecurity space. But when it's exercised properly, that offensive kind of technique can bring really meaningful results in terms of the reduction in the incentives and the potential outcomes, the value of potential outcomes for an attacker. And look, I've been in the security business for a long time, not as long as Ed, but for a long time. And one thing I've learned and it's been reinforced with for me over and over again is that the right measure of security is security that costs about the same amount to defeat as whatever it's protecting. More security than that's kind of unnecessary. Less security than that, and you have a problem. So by thinking through that balance and by making things just hard enough so that it's not worth defeating them anymore, you've really won the battle in security, or at least you're able to move on to the next battle in security, where other organizations tend to get bogged down.
Really smooth counter intel move. I like it.
Like how you kind of brought it back to, our first question where there was a problem. In ways it was addressed. The problem is now evolved to something else, requiring a different approach. Before we jump into some, I keep saying customer attendee question. You're gonna be, that's why I'm saying it. But really quick, gonna ask you to look into your crystal balls. And I want to look at this problem area kind of from the attacker's perspective, talking about the future of brand protection, the future of brand abuse, the future of brand impersonation. How do you expect scammers will pivot in the future? And what do cybersecurity, fraud, legal, IP, infringement professionals need to be keeping in mind as they prepare for that future? And I'll let whoever kind of jump in that wants to start.
I'll jump in a couple of really simple examples. I think we're going to see the scammers try to outpace real businesses in dominating their digital brands online. So I think the businesses who don't establish their own digital brand are going to have it established for them. And I think brands that are going digital, traditional brick and mortar brands that are trying to bring their business online and more digital they're going to be challenged to maintain dominance and ownership over their online brand if they don't take proactive steps to get there. And I'm seeing the signs of that happening sort of already out there. And I also think that we're going to continue to see the story of the day get heavily wrapped up into scams. We've seen dozens of different styles of scams that centered around COVID. Now we're seeing an explosion of scams that center around the war in Ukraine. These kind of things, they tug at people's heartstrings, they pull at their emotions, and that's a very effective mechanism for getting someone to pull out their wallet and put their credit card number in or their Bitcoin wallet address or what have you that can continue to lead to this pain. So, I think that's what we have to see in the future. And I think it becomes more and more difficult as time goes on to know what you actually can trust, what's actually legitimate and real on the internet and what's not. And again, the charities supporting the war in Ukraine is an incredible example of this right now. Go looking around and I challenge you to tell the difference between the legitimate sites and the scam sites. They all look the same. They were all hastily thrown together. And, it's a very tough situation, I think, for folks who want to help.
One thing I would chime in with, I agree with Josh's assessment for sure. A trend that we see in our work at Tag Cyber is that more of the scam and online targeting seems to be aimed at individuals associated with a company, like the high profile individuals, executives, senior key personnel type folks. And it's funny how it becomes all intertwined, right? Your work life, your personal life, it all becomes this one digital persona that kind of merges in with the corporate brand and the domain, and it's all becoming very blurred. So when you go after, for example, the CEO of a company, a lot of times that's a very effective component of a whole vectored strategy if you're going after the organization. So that's something we see. We see the attack sort of expanding horizontally to be not just domain brand impersonation. That's clearly right, set in where the arrows aim. But we do see around the edges people going after individuals, prominent individuals as well. Very, very clear trend.
As a final ad, the future of brand protection, scammer continues to win for some period of time. The scammer has the ability to go to smaller businesses, smaller industries, localized, because there's just always another weak link to be exploited. The fact that they have the same automation that Josh has, it'll be easier for them to find those, target those. So bottom line is, so long as there's a profit without consequence, the movie never ends. For me, I need to do a lot more to cause my industry, my value chain, my ecosystem to join together, right? So it's kind of like, once upon a time, folks found out about spam filtering. Oh, it was not a short period of time for everyone to say, maybe we should all do this. Well, in the next generation of cyber, I need my entire industry to sign up at the same time, collaborate it the same way to drive them out of my industry. Another historical example, credit card fraud pre-chip. That was a nice 25-year run. Right. So I think if corporations lead the way and lead for industries that they're part of, or supply chains that they're part of, it could get the walls up faster. It could get things closed out, but it's going to be a while.
That's great. Thank you all for kind of your predictions there. Okay, I think we have time for like one really quick audience question, and actually it's directed to Josh because it's specific to Allure Security. So the question is, do you find client names in Google searches? Malicious ads may use the name of the company, but the domain doesn't look anything like the company name. Can you take that one, Josh?
Yeah, one of the things that we do is look for our customers' names, product names, things like that in advertisements. We've got some special curated data, private data that we've got just for ourselves that we've had built out there that gives us this sort of feed of advertising that lets us look for an ad with, again, customer names, customer product names, things like that in them, and then follow the links and see whether those links lead to the legitimate sites or impersonations of those brands or products or things like that. So that's one of the many leads that we'll follow to find impersonation scams that are targeting Allure Security clients.
Thanks for that, Josh. A couple more questions that came in, but we're actually going to follow up offline because they're kind of specific. And so we want to make good use of everybody's time, but we'll definitely follow up with the questioners there. So first of all, I just want to stop and I just really want to give everybody an opportunity to kind of put a sort of period on their talking today. So we'll start with Ed, we'll go to David, and then we'll go to Josh. Just any final quick thoughts.
Good. I hope people will take the threat seriously here. This is an intense problem, and it's not just this sort of trite financial loss. This can lead to more significant consequence. So I'm glad people are listening to the webinar, and I hope some of the suggestions here, particularly from David and Josh, are things that people will take seriously.
I hope we go out and do a little more to collaborate, right? Information sharing builds cases, information sharing builds education. They do a good job with Intel. We should do that as well. We're not alone in this.
So we could put an end to this problem. I mean, it's time to really make impersonation of brands on the internet a thing of the past. It's achievable now. There's work that's got to be done, but there's just a tremendous value in doing it in terms of the societal good of the internet and the business impact that that we can have by reducing those scams. So, you know, I think the time is now. Like the last time I talked to Ed, he said enough is enough. This is an old problem. It's been around forever. It's time to solve it. Enough is enough. It's time to solve it. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks, of course, to our panelists, Ed, David, Josh, just very great insights here. Thank you so much. I encourage attendees to visit alluresecurity.com for more resources about this issue of online brand impersonations and to learn more about what modern brand protection looks like. As a reminder, we'll be sending a link to the recording of this discussion in the next day or so that you can reference it and or share it with your colleagues that need to hear the message as well. And I think with that, this is a wrap. So thanks a lot again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And, you know, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.